Hello and welcome to this Davos India Today Brainstorm Special, where we are going to be looking at some of the finest minds and thought leaders to analyze what has been a dramatic few days here in this Swiss town at the World Economic Forum. All eyes, remember, have been on Donald Trump and what he's done and not done over the last few days. Among my special guests today will be Ian Bremmer, the president of the Eurasia Group. We will also have Martin Wolf, the leading chief economic commentator of the Financial Times, Ravi Agarwal, editor-in-chief of Foreign Policy, and indeed in an exclusive, the one and only Richard Quest, business editor at large at CNN. So plenty to look forward to on this Davos Brainstorm Special.
Trump unveils Board of Peace. European allies stay away. US bid to sideline United Nations.
People thought I would use force. I don't have to use force. I don't want to use force. I won't use force.
Trump tells Europe to give up Greenland.
You can say yes, and we will be very appreciative, or you can say no, and we will remember.
Allies cold shoulder amid Greenland chill.
Argue the middle powers must act together because if we're not at the table, we're on the menu.
World caught in Trump turbulence. Who will bail Donald Trump?
Years ago, a British Prime Minister said a week is a long time in politics. He is perhaps wrong because in the age in which we live, the Trumpian era, even 24 hours can be a very long time. Just about 24 hours ago, the US president launched an extraordinary attack on his European allies, describing them, many of them, as stupid. A few hours later, though, on Truth Social, Donald Trump said that he wasn't imposing tariffs on Europe, that NATO was still very much there, and that he would in fact have a framework for a deal on Greenland in place. Today, he's about to sign, we are told, the Board of Peace on Gaza. There's also talk of a meeting with Ukrainian President Zelensky and the possibility of some thaw in the ice between Russia and Ukraine. With Donald Trump, you never know what tomorrow brings. Therefore, to get a sense today, we are kicking off our special program with someone who's become an expert in predicting the future, even in these Trumpian times, these extraordinary times in which we live. Joining me now is Ian Bremmer, president of Eurasia Group, political scientist, author. Good to have you, Mr. Bremmer, on our special coverage. Give us your prediction for these extraordinary times. I know it's very tough. We had the World Economic Forum, President, where you were the other day, and he said we are living in the most challenging and complex time since 1945. Given all that, I still want you to put your thinking cap on and tell me what's going to happen over the next 12 months. What can we expect in this Trumpian era next?
Well, first, let's recognize that Trumpian era is what he wants you to call it, but it's not very accurate. The United States is the most powerful country in the world. I accept that. President Trump is not the most powerful leader. Xi Jinping is. Why is that? Xi Jinping doesn't have midterm elections. He doesn't have an independent judiciary. Trump isn't going to be there in 3 years. Xi Jinping is, right? And so there is, Trump is getting all the headlines. He's getting all the media attention. Xi Jinping is actually in the better position as a leader. In many ways, Modi is in better position as a leader. Longer term, more consistent, allows Modi to push back more effectively than many of the European leaders, and we've seen that over the last few days. I guess one thing I would say, one thing that we've learned from these 3 days that we've wasted on Greenland is that it turns out that even the Europeans are capable of hitting the Americans back effectively, because this was taco. right? This was Trump chickening out. He said he was going to own Greenland. He threatened them. There were going to be tariffs on all of the countries by February 1 that supported Denmark. He backed off of all of those things, and he got nothing for it. Why? Why did that happen? Well, number one, because the Europeans were prepared to actually put reciprocal tariffs in place and use the anti-coercion instrument. Number two, because it turns out that there are issues back in the United States where there are real divides, including among Republicans. And this is one of them. In fact, Greenland was even worse for Trump than the Epstein files in polling. Minus 38 on Epstein, minus 40 on Greenland. And the Republicans were telling him, we will not support you on this issue. So he had to back down, especially when the markets tanked. And then number three, and this is the most important thing, India is a partner and a friend of the United States. The Europeans are allies of the United States. That is different from being a partner and friend of President Trump. And when we see policies that are being advanced by Trump that are in his interest, but not in the interest of the United States, that has to be mentioned. And owning Greenland is not in the interest of the United States. Strategic cooperation, more security with the Europeans, sure. Owning Greenland was an ego issue for President Trump personally, and that's why he failed. And that's an important thing for us to understand.
So was Greenland then a distraction possibly from the Epstein files? And are you saying, therefore, relations with between the US and Europe will return back to some kind of normalcy, if at all that word can be used?
No, what I'm saying is that Greenland was an opportunity for the Europeans to see that even divided with 27 countries and not a single state, it's not like India, it's not like China, that they were capable of drawing a red line and backing Trump down. But they have learned, because, I mean, let's face it, if it wasn't for Greenland, we would have been talking about the border peace a lot more this week. And while Trump was pushing and treating the Europeans with contempt on Greenland, he was also inviting the Russian president and the Belarusian president to join the border peace. The countries that the Americans and the Europeans are at war with, he didn't even discuss it with the Europeans in advance. So the Europeans do not feel like they can trust President Trump. And that is leading them to hedge with other countries. You know, President Trump has said that he wants credit for these 8 wars that he has ended. But he deserves credit for the EU-Mercosur trade deal. That trade deal was not going to happen until Trump became president and started pushing the Europeans and the Donroe Doctrine South Americans around. And then they said, we need to do this deal. Mark Carney went to Beijing and he rebuilt a relationship with Xi Jinping that had been in the toilet between Canada and China. Donald Trump deserves credit for that. I mean, if it wasn't for that, it wouldn't have happened. And we need to say that Trump deserves credit for that.
So Trump is actually enabling countries to sort of diversify and de-risk away from America. But I just want to, we'll come to the border peace in a moment, Mr. Bremmer. Is the moral of the story of the last 3 days that if you push back against Trump, the big bully, Trump chickens out? Because there could be a lesson there for India as well. We've got a trade deal with the United States that is still hanging fire, that you don't cede to Donald Trump or to play to his ego. I mean, there are 2 ways to deal, it appears, with Donald Trump. Either you play with his ego, as the Pakistanis are doing, virtually suggesting that there's a red carpet rolled out for Donald Trump, or do you go the way certain other countries are doing? You mentioned Canada there. Mark Carney was very clear that the middle powers have to come together at a moment like this and stop this coercion that America, without naming them, seems to be imposing on the world.
What I'm saying is that there is a strategy to push back on Trump and succeed. But you have to have a leader that is willing and capable of actually executing on that policy. The obvious example of that is Xi Jinping, right? I mean, Trump hit the Chinese hard with tariffs, Liberation Day. China did not pick up the phone. Instead, they retaliated, including on critical minerals, and basically showed the Americans, without panicking, they showed the Americans, we will shut down your industries if you don't actually treat us with respect. What's happening now? Trump meets with Xi Jinping in Busan. He calls it a G2. He gives parity, treats China as a peer, and now he's traveling to Beijing. It's going to be a much more successful meeting. So Xi Jinping was in the position that he could make that happen. Now, Mark Carney thinks that he is in a stronger position, and that's why he's pushing Trump around. But I saw in that speech that Trump gave here at Davos, he called out Mark Carney a number of times, and he said, you know, we're not going to tolerate that. this is a risk that Mark Carney is taking. I happen to think that it is a politically savvy move for him as Prime Minister, but it is possible that that risk will not pay off. It is possible that Canada will end up in a recession because of that risk and because of Trump hitting back. Because Canada is not only a much smaller economy, but it's very dependent on the U.S. economy. Now, India, you've got a country that is growing by over 7%. You've got a leader that's very popular with, yes, a coalition government, but he's done very well in local elections recently, Bihar and the rest, right? And not only that, but the Indians are not that dependent on trade with the United States. India is useful to the U.S. in its strategic relationship as a hedge against China with the Quad and the rest. So I believe that Modi is in one of the stronger positions to push back against Trump of most leaders in the world.
Let's, on that moment, come to what is the latest Trump headline, the border peace, where he's effectively asking countries to put $1 billion to become part of this board.
That's not exactly true. That's not exactly true.
Frozen asset of $1 billion.
No. You can join,
yes,
no money, but if you want to be a permanent member, as opposed to 3 years, then you have to pay $1 billion. Yes. No one has contributed that $1 billion, to my knowledge, that has accepted membership so far. I just want to clarify that.
So what should countries like India, who've been offered to join the border peace, in your view, do? Do you join hands with Donald Trump, knowing that he could just change his mind in a month from now and move in an entirely different direction? To what extent do countries like India, and it comes back to the point of pushback, do we indulge Donald Trump when he comes back with an idea like the border peace on Gaza? Is it an idea worth pursuing in the first instance?
The head of the World Bank is on it. You've got the Emiratis that have said that they're joining. The Israelis are joining. The Russians have not said they're joining yet, even though Trump said that Putin said he was going to join. Frequently there's a gap there. But the French have said they won't. The Germans couldn't because the Constitution actually forbids it. So I think that this is a less important question than how India handles their trade deal with the United States. This is not a matter of the Indians offering $1 billion. This is not a permanent commitment. If it doesn't go well, the Indians could step away, just as the Italians joined Belt and Road as a G7 country and then pulled right out. What I think is important is that this Board of Peace should not be used to undermine multilateralism of the United Nations, should not be used to break institutions that are important globally and that India benefits from, and that India participates in. And that if India decides to participate, they need to make sure that that participation is constructive and does not foster a long-term development that will make everyone worse off.
Let's look again at predictions. We are in Europe at the moment. Ukraine dominates a lot of the conversation. We still don't know at this moment, while we are speaking, whether President Zelensky will meet Donald Trump here in Davos. Do you believe that the war could end in the next 12 months, or are we again heading potentially for a prolonged conflict that's already gone on really for 4 years?
4 years, almost 4 years. It doesn't look like it's ending soon. President Trump understands he wants a ceasefire, but he has more leverage over Ukraine, even though Ukraine is the side that the United States is fighting with, because the Ukrainians are weak. So he believes he can force Zelensky to capitulate. And we've seen that with the critical minerals deal. We've seen that with accepting a ceasefire with no preconditions. We've seen that with a willingness maybe even to withdraw from some of the presently Ukrainian-occupied territories of Ukraine to make them demilitarized. We've seen that with even Zelensky willing to talk about elections while the war is going on. All of those are things he would not do under Biden, but Trump has forced him to. How has Putin conceded on anything? What has Putin offered? The United States has put a little bit of pressure on, not like Ukraine. They put a little pressure on, but Putin sees, in his view, that holding on longer and forcing the weaker Ukrainians to continue to capitulate while driving wedges between the United States and Europe and NATO is a stronger play for Russia. He believes they can wait the Ukrainians, the Americans, the Europeans out. And so far, that's been a smart move on his part.
So you're saying no immediate end to the conflict in Ukraine. Today, the German Chancellor, Friedrich Merz, said the world is seeing the final days of Iran's regime. Predictions for that part of the world. Do you see the Iranian regime being toppled in the near future? I mean, it almost seemed that because Trump did what he did in Venezuela, where he effected a regime change, or not a regime change, removed the president, removed an individual, and has allowed his vice president to continue, and spoke more of oil than democracy in Venezuela, that he could do the same in Iran.
Yeah.
Iran is clearly not Venezuela. How do you see Iran playing out?
So I have to say, Chancellor Merz first said, it was about a week and a half ago, he said that he thought that the Iranian regime was on its last days or weeks.
Yes.
I was quite startled by that. There's no intelligence on the ground that implies that. I mean, the demonstrations at that point were already getting much weaker. The Iranian regime is willing and capable to repress with great force. And there were no breaches, no breaks within the regime that I could see, either within the IRGC, the Revolutionary Guard Corps, the besieged, the paramilitary groups that carry out most of the actual repression. I didn't see it with the state media, not with telecommunications and the internet that was all shut down. I didn't see it. And so, yes, the United States might well engage in further strikes against Iran, but I just saw Steve Witkoff, the principal negotiator on many of these issues, came out and he said, look, you know, even after the Iranians have killed thousands of civilians, he said, well, maybe we can negotiate with them. If they're willing to negotiate, maybe we can get something done. So I don't see, I'd love to be wrong, but I don't think that in the near term, this Islamic Republic is about to collapse.
So in conclusion, the big worldview, are we heading, as the German Chancellor again says, it's the end of the old order. As we knew it, there is a new world order there. If there is one, what is the shape of this new world order? I keep hearing words like multipolar world order, G2, China and America. What is this new world order that's emerging out of this chaos?
So what I called it 15 years ago was a G0 world. I said that as the
G0 world,
yes,
nice word.
What
does that mean?
It means, well, as the United States withdraws from leadership of its own global order with its allies, that no other country or group of countries are capable and willing of replacing the United States. So you will have a period of time of a geopolitical recession, a bust cycle, where it is messy, where it is chaotic, where there is a lot of impunity. And I see emerging three very different kinds of global orders. In the economic space, the world is already very multipolar. The Europeans are showing that with their trade competencies. The Chinese showed this to Trump very clearly. The U.S. is clearly a major pole. India is emerging very rapidly. It's multipolar. But in the security order, it's still very unipolar. If the United States wants to do something, very few people can stop them. No one else can project power like that globally. And then in the technology space, actually China dominates it as a government, but in the West it's dominated not by governments, it's dominated by companies. It's becoming increasingly technopolar. And so these three emerging orders are kind of jostling side by side in different spaces at the same time.
It's fascinating you said that about technopolar world, because you stirred a bit of a controversy by suggesting that India was a laggard when it came to AI, which is the other big buzzword here in Davos.
That's not what I said.
It was suggested. I mean, that's what we heard, that Ian Bremmer said India is a laggard when it comes to AI technology.
Ian Bremmer said that there are two countries that are leading in the world on AI, the United States and China. This is obvious. It is a fact. It is true. India is doing quite well compared to its economic status and relative power as developing AI, especially human capacity, talent, and increasingly investment, even legal framework. But you cannot compare the ability to attract capital and impact outcomes of India to the U.S. and China today in AI.
So therefore, in this world of various polarities, economic, political, and technology, net, where does India stand? How should India see itself as we go ahead to 2026? What do you see India's immediate 12-month timeline? I'm not even looking beyond 12 months.
As you said at the beginning, India is a middle power. It's very important. It's stable. And the fact that India has leadership, that is more consolidated and popular than leadership in almost any other democracy around the world. Only Mexico really has similarity among larger countries, means that India is capable of pushing back in ways that other countries are not. That helps India. Consistent leadership over time is something that is lacking in the world today. India looks very stable. It's a great growth story. But still, the Americans and the Chinese are dominating most of the conversations. And when you talk to the big players here, who are like allocating capital all over the world, and they say, we don't trust the United States so much anymore, what are they talking about? Reallocating to China, because China has the market size and China has the technology. India is not in that conversation at this point.
Which is interesting because someone told me that Donald Trump decided that he wanted to make America great again. He's ended up making China looking great again.
There's no question that Donald Trump is making China great again. Yes, that's true.
Okay.
Yes.
Ian Bremmer, for giving us this wonderful worldview in 20 minutes about where we stand amidst all the chaos around us. I appreciate you breaking it down for us so succinctly. Thank you very much. Good to have you here on India Today at the Davos Summit. Thank you. Ian Bremmer at the World Economic Forum, one of the finest minds that you can get when it comes to breaking down the world order as it stands. Rajdeep Sardesai in Davos for India Today. All eyes have been predictably on Donald Trump over the last 24 hours, and there's plenty more to talk about. Joining us now on this Trumpian world order that we are trying to unravel are two very special guests. Martin Wolf, Chief Economics Commentator at the Financial Times, and Ravi Agarwal, Editor-in-Chief of Foreign Policy. Appreciate both of you joining us. I set off today by suggesting that Harold Wilson, one of your prime ministers, Martin, in Britain, said a week is a long time in politics. With Donald Trump, it's less than 24 hours. What have you made out of that extraordinary attack that we saw 24 hours ago by Donald Trump on the European allies, and then, of course, backing off? But how do you see all of this? I mean, have you ever experienced anything like this in your long track record of covering geoeconomics and geopolitics?
The simple answer is no. In fact, I am reasonably well educated. I was a classicist, so I read lots of Latin Greek history, and I've read about Indian history. I can't think of a political leader like this before. Obviously, we can see echoes with others, you know, the megalomania, the Trump-Kennedy Center, all the rest of it. That sort of looks classic dictatorial kitsch and megalomania. But like the volatility of policy making, the unpredictability of policy making, big policy decisions. I mean, a few days ago, no, yesterday, we thought he was going to launch a trade war for sure, and possibly a real war on a NATO ally. And this was the tightest, most durable, most powerful military alliance, underpinned by values, there's ever been. So it's really extraordinary. It was inconceivable. We've already known, it's clear from the national security strategy that they launched last year, that they do regard, or parts of it administration, regard the Europeans as the great enemy. In my view, I've written about this because they're too much like the Democrats. But the point is, we don't know what that's where we were, and now today we're apparently told, yeah, it's all off. So I don't know what to make of this, except I can only quote at the end the famous line from my dear colleague Robert Armstrong, Taco, Trump always chickens out. Well, he doesn't always, but this time he seems to have.
That's right. He didn't chicken out when it came to Venezuela. He didn't chicken out really when it came to Iran a few months ago. Ravi, what are you making out of what happened? I was seeing you typing away furiously a comment soon after the Trump speech. You probably had to revise your column a few hours later. What do you make out of Donald Trump and what he's doing, not just in the last 24 hours, but really in the last 12 months?
You know, so I think taco is a great phrase to use with Trump.
Trump always chickens out.
Trump always chickens out. But it doesn't apply to everyone. He chickens out when there are bigger powers or collections of powers that cumulatively represent a threat to him in some form. With other leaders, smaller countries, mid-sized economies, it's more FAFO, F around and find out, you know. In other words...
Say that again? FAFO. F around.
F around and find out. Sorry, I know this is a family channel.
No,
but,
that's good.
But the implication there is that Trump feels that we are in a world in which might is right, and that the United States has the biggest, most powerful army and economy in the world, and it can have its way with smaller powers. So, for example, in the last year, we've seen Trump quite famously now step back from the brink with China the minute China decided to exercise some control over its rare earths. It has a complete monopoly on the processing of critical minerals and rare earths. And that was the end of a phase of, you know, a growing trade war between the United States and China. Trump backed off in the face of threats. But when it comes to Venezuela, you mentioned, he went ahead, broke international law and domestic law because he felt there were no consequences. So what will be very interesting to see when the dust settles on yesterday's event is what has actually emerged from this so-called, quote-unquote, future deal with NATO. Because, you know, if it is that the United States has emerged with everything that it had before, which was the ability to have more troops in Greenland, bases that it already has, then this was all smoke and mirrors. If, however, there are some suggestions that the United States may get small pockets of sovereign bases within Greenland, then Trump might have something to show for it. Mark Rutte, the head of NATO, of course, cannot negotiate that. You need Denmark to do the negotiating there. But either way, this is all much of a muchness. Raji, the bigger thing here is that he barely talked about Ukraine in his speech yesterday, and ultimately that is the big threat that Europe faces.
Martin, you wanted to add something?
Ravi might well have a view of this, but what I'm reading, I'm not there, is that there are two possible linked other factors. One is, it's very clear from the polls, to me, that Trump's popularity is waning. And this might explain why there seems to be some credible pushback in parts of Congress. It became pretty clear, at least some senators' comments, they really weren't very keen on supporting the president if he started a war with NATO, as it were. And one of the reasons they might be braver now is they actually feel Trump coattails and also his damage that he can do to them are weaker. He's weaker. And
you actually think Trump has become weaker as a...
I'm not saying he has. I have no idea. What I'm saying is that Congress is behaving in a way, for the reason I suggest, which indicates that they think they can be bolder, and that would imply that they think Trump is weaker. They're less vulnerable to him. And if that's the case, that does matter for Trump. So he won't want, and he's a very political animal, he doesn't want to get into a big fight with people who do have genuine power. The Senate has genuine power, of course, and so it may be that when he was backing off, it wasn't just he didn't want a war with NATO, as it were. He actually doesn't want to go to territory where he might lose critical support at home.
Interesting, because there are those who believe not just in that what Donald Trump is doing, while he talks about American power, he's actually, in a sense, retreating from the US's role across the world as this dominant power, that he's actually going to leave America weaker by taking on allies, by, in a sense, reaching out to strongmen like Vladimir Putin or President Xi in China. Do you get that sense that if Trump takes this forward over the next 12 months, he's only going to weaken American power and leave America more isolated?
In my view, yes. Not in his view. I think Trump doesn't see power the way you or I do. America's secret sauce over the last 80 years has been its network of alliances. The fact that other countries don't seek to balance it, they seek to join it. Every time there's another great power, China, Russia, other powers try to balance it. With America, they try to join it. Trump doesn't see that as a strength. Instead, you know, rather than the subtlety of alliances and what I just mentioned, Trump likes blunt force. He looks back to a more imperial and performative imperial form of American strength and power, and that's what we're seeing. He wants to use American military might, and it almost seems like he's only just discovering what he can do with the American military. If you look at Venezuela, but also Iran last year, he likes the idea of short, sharp bursts of American military might. He doesn't want to get embroiled in longer wars. Remember, again, Trump really came of the view that the Iraq war and the Afghanistan wars were extremely damaging to the United States, and it's not popular. So I don't see us going back to that era either.
But it is also at one level, Martin Wolf, about it's the economy stupid. At the moment, the American economy has shown some resilience, but there are signs of inflation rising, possibly jobs slowing down, and maybe the economy will slow down. Some talk of the R word, recession. Your sense, will that in a way be the critical factor over the next 12 months? How the domestic economy performs, because with midterm elections coming up in the United States in November, Donald Trump surely must recognize the limits of his power if the economy doesn't really hold any longer.
The elections are going to be incredibly important. That's absolutely clear. And given the situation, it is, if there's any normal midterm adjustment, he will lose the House of Representatives. It seems, from what I understand, very unlikely that he will lose the Senate, but you can't be sure. And that will depend very much on just how disgusted the American people are with him. We have very clear signs that a very significant proportion of Americans don't like a lot of the things which are non-economic that have been done. ICE operating in immigration customs enforcement body, operating freely in cities, shooting people without any comeback. It makes people frightened. Remember, he did incredibly well with Hispanic voters. If they feel, well, I could be pulled off the street and put in custody, like that, all that's important. And clearly, there are a lot of people, even supporters, who are quite uncomfortable with this. But of course, if the economy really goes bad, they've got a big unemployment problem. Unemployment is quite high. If inflation starts rising, and we don't know what the new Fed is going to do. It may not happen, but if it does, very strong economy, goosed up further by the Fed, there may be a good employment outcome, but inflation might rise. Lots of economists I've been in a discussion think it will go up to 4% plus. If that happens, and the outcome is an electoral defeat on this scale, it will weaken him enormously. There's no doubt about it. So it is always, the economy is stupid is the right thing, and he must be worried about it.
So Ravi, looking ahead to the next 12 months, and I know 12 months is a very long time, it almost seems like an eternity, but if we were to meet again a year from now in Davos, how do you see the world? Will it be as unstable and as unsettled as it appears today? The crisis in Iran, Trump's Donro doctrine taking over parts of the Western Hemisphere, a sense that you don't just know what happens next. Do you believe the world will be in a more settled place 12 months from now? Or with Donald Trump, the next 3 years, we're on a roller coaster?
It's not just Donald Trump. I think even if America were to have a new leader in 3 years' time, the instability that we're seeing right now has just gotten started. And I'll tell you why. Mark Carney, Canada's Prime Minister, was very clear in his speech, which was excellent, on Tuesday, in which he said there is a rupture in the world order. And what he meant by that was that some of what we've been discussing about Trump's might makes right world. But he also made very clear that other countries aren't going to just stand by. They're going to find other alliances. Canada and China, for example, within the space of 1 year, they've gone from being countries that couldn't talk to each other publicly to now cutting tariffs on electric vehicles and so on and so forth.
India is about to sign a big deal with the European Union, a big trade deal with
the EU has done so with Mercosur, the South American bloc. There is a sense that countries are getting on with their business, but even that is not settled and stable. I see the next few years as an interregnum between world orders. We don't know what's coming next. All we know is that the here and now is chaotic, it is messy, and it is Trumpian.
And what do we see on the other side of this world order? Are we entering, as the German Chancellor said, a completely new world order?
My view is very close to Ravi's. My view, and I wrote about this in my column yesterday, we are moving into an era of disorder, period. The only power that had the capacity to enforce an order, and did so, for all the problems and failures over the last, since the Second World War, 80 years, was the US. and that was because it was the biggest economy. It had enormously powerful institutions of soft power, universities, media, and all the rest of it, and it was trusted by a very large number of countries. Not absolutely, made huge mistakes, and it had very powerful allies. I believe, and just to underline this, the US we used to know is gone. Whatever happens now, Trump will, as it were, we can't forget Trump, and we can't forget the possibility that even if he is defeated, he goes in the next presidential election and the Democrat, he can come back. That America is gone, and nobody can take its place. So what we're going to have is countries doing deals, but those deals will be unstable because they will always be hedging against one another, because the EU and China may do a deal, but they will always be hedging. India will be hedging. And so in a hedging world, nothing has that sort of stability. So there isn't going to be a new order. Global orders are unnatural. Right. The one we've lived in was a historical freak. It's never happened before, and I think it won't happen again.
So it's the new world disorder in a way, which is, Ravi, an exciting time to be a journalist. As I said, Ravi was typing away furiously after the Trump speech for foreign policy, giving his comment, and then probably had to change it a few hours later. So it's actually making foreign policy in real time now. There's no time to think anymore. It's a pretty exciting time to be commentators and journalists.
It is, but if I had to pick between that time and stability, I would pick the stability. And the reason is, I don't think this chaos, this mess, is necessarily good for the world.
Okay, we leave it at that. Martin Wolf and Ravi Agarwal for giving us an insightful analysis of this Trumpian world disorder, as we are now calling it. Appreciate you joining us here on India Today.